Hello and welcome to the Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. This week, our guest is Lisa Lerer, the co-author of an extraordinary new book, The Fall of Roe, and a national political correspondent for the New York Times. Now remember, we love taking your questions, so write into politicswarroom@gmail.com or send a tweet to @Politicon for next week's show. We're going to get to as many as we can, but don't forget to tell us where you're from. And please check out the links to our sponsors, Beam and Miracle Made, in our episode show notes. We thank you for supporting these sponsors. It really helps make this podcast happen. Please tell your friends about us and remind them to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Hey, James, another first. The president's son, Hunter, was convicted for lying on a form to purchase a gun. And could face a prison term even. This is personally painful for Joe Biden, who I think handled it magnificently. His son could face, as I say, a prison term. Politically, does it matter?
You know, I was on the plane, like Delta Wi-Fi, when looked at the, guilty verdict. And 5 minutes later, I said, I think this is going to help Biden. I now no longer think it's going to help Biden. I'm almost sure it's going to help Biden. And I hate to give Trump credit for anything, but he immediately saw this was bad politics. And he said, the first thing he said, I'm going to pardon him. Because but huge majority of families in the United States have struggled with a family member or maybe themselves with addiction. No one believes these people are criminals. And you could just see the facial looks. They'd interviewed these Republican congressmen, and you could just see that they had this, oh, shit moment. We're like the dog that caught the car. Okay, fine. Enjoy the hubcap. And you could feel it. And then, because you must watch Fox. You can't be an informed citizen or in politics without. So what do they do? So here's Fox. They got this verdict. They got to fill up the night card. And the explanation is this was a fake move by Joe Biden and the Justice Department to get this guilty verdict so people wouldn't look at Joe Biden or some shit like that. Okay? Right. They had lied. And I hope Media Matters, it probably will, get the number of times Hunter Biden has been mentioned on Fox in the last year. So the old senile, can't utter a sentence, lost 50 steps, has manipulated this vast operation where they indict his son and then they get a guilty verdict in order to draw attention away from himself. I'm not kidding you. This is what they are saying. You have to watch it. It's that fucking crazy. And they know they're caught. And you could just see it. You could feel the whole thing. And, of course, every Democrat is, I believe, look, the jury has had a tough time to make. Addiction is a tough problem, blah, blah, blah. We're winning this. We're not doing okay or anything like that. We're winning. And they don't know what to do or what to say. They're caught. And it was the weirdest thing. And I didn't give it a lot of thought. But just like you have an event that happens and your gut just kicks in overtime, my gut was kicking in overtime. This is going to, in some combination, hurt the Republicans and help Biden.
I think you're right. Among other things, it undercuts or destroys the GOP lie that the Justice Department has been politicized. I mean, they've now indicted the president's son, the top Senate Democrat, top House Democrat. But of course, House Republicans aren't quite as smart as Trump. I hate to give Trump credit again. But James Comer, who heads the clown show, otherwise known as the House Oversight Committee, says, look, this is the tip of the iceberg of the huge global crime syndicate run by the Bidens. I mean, he really said that. Let me ask you this, James, because I think you're pretty good with numbers. If you added James Comer and Tommy Tuberville's IQ, would you hit triple digits?
I doubt it. But I say this in a minute. If we had someone that stupid run a congressional committee, if we had this disastrous Hunter Biden, I call it persecution or prosecution, and understand this is more evidence of what they say already, but Biden is grandly manipulating this whole thing to have his son indicted, to take attention away the fact that the Biden crime, it's so insane. But I believe if we had this kind of incompetence, people like you and I would be criticizing them. I think MSNBC would criticize them. I think the mainstream media would criticize them. I would people say this is ridiculous. We can't have this level of incompetence. And I'm serious. Their answer to incompetence is to have more aggressive incompetence and stupidity. And you're correct about Comer. The guy couldn't deliver a pizza. And Carville is a kind of benignly stupid man. I don't even know what the branches of government are or says. Comer is his stupidity is more aggressive than Tuberville's.
Yeah.
I think.
I mean, the latest thing is they're going to go and they're going to, try to bring an action against Merrick Garland. Now, what is Merrick Garland's offense as a Attorney General? It is that he has turned over the entire transcript of the special counsel's interview with Joe Biden to Congress. That's the one where her decided not to bring a charge. Now they want to hear the tape, which has no relevance other than they hope they'll then find snippets which they can put out, probably distort, to say how bad he was. There's no reason for doing that. They have all the information. It's just a pure, crass political move. And they're going to cite him for contempt. These aren't serious people, James. They really are not serious people.
Well, okay. They have so much vested in it. And it's hard for the layman to understand how much is vested in the whole Hunter Biden crime family narrative. So they really can't walk away from it. So they have to have something new.
Yep.
Because what are you going to say on TV? So the new thing is they won't give us the live video. And if you think that you give them that's going to satisfy them, the answer is no. They'll want Joe Biden to testify or anything. They have to they cannot let this go. It's bad for them, and they can't just walk away from it. And that's what all this is about. Somebody has got to think. They have some 25-year-old intern at Fox on some congressional campaign committee, and we need something new because we're losing this very badly. And all our people want is just anything. So give them that. There's no video of Joe Biden, and Merrick Garland's protecting him. Well, audio is already out there. Well, we need the video because we need to look at, I don't know. You're never going to answer it.
No, you're not. James, you raised it. I wish the Times or the Post or the Wall Street Journal would do a piece on who these staffers are that are staffing James Comer and Jim Jordan and company, because clearly Comer is outrageous, is what he said, isn't up to even going that far. I mean, there is a core of young, really right-wing hit ladies up there, and I like to at least read about them. I think they're, incredibly important.
Yeah, that would be terrific. We should put like a face and who are these people that who's the counsel to the committee? Who's the staff?
Right. And I think Jane Mayer has written there's an outside group that plays a huge role in this. So we'd like to know who they are and what are they getting out of it and who's funding them.
Yeah. It's all a giant, massive failure, and they just keep covering failure up with more failure.
No, they do. James, let me skip around with a couple political points. Biden had a few more verbal slips, and he seemed to freeze once at the White House. He reinforced the age problems. I fear that's a regular occurrence, and it gets attention. But I wish more attention would be paid to the unhinged Trump performance at Las Vegas last weekend. I just want to read. I want to read part of a quote, and it doesn't really do it justice. This is Donald Trump, quote, "There are a lot of shark attacks lately. A lot of sharks. I watched some guys justifying it today. They weren't really that angry, not because they were hungry, but misunderstood who she was. These people are crazy. A lot of shark attacks." He then added, if a choice between electrocution or shark attacks, he'd take electrocution. Can you imagine what Fox would do if Biden did anything like that?
Well, I can assure that crowd in Las Vegas, you're not going to get a shark attack.
You haven't seen any sharks in those MGM bathtubs?
You may die of heat stroke. That's a real possibility. It's so unhinged and so crazy. But if this June the 27th debate goes off, I would, you know how they monitor the number of heart attacks during the Super Bowl or something like that?
Right.
Democrats are going to have a nervous breakdown for 90 minutes, scared that Biden is going to draw a blank. I mean,
they are. And if he gets through it, there's going to be a sigh of relief like you've never heard before.
But it's just, if my advice, if you listen to this and you have any kind of, you think you have heart disease, if you think something like that, don't look.
Yeah.
Don't look. I'll probably go get a physical on June the 26th to see if I can watch it.
James, there were some elections this week, not big ones, but some. The people that Trump endorsed in Republican primaries, as expected, won a Nevada Senate race and some congressional races. In South Carolina, Nancy Mace won. When Nancy Mace was elected, when she was elected to Congress, I remember telling someone who was going to try to keep a diary on some of the new members, this could be a real superstar. She's a smart conservative, the first woman graduate of the Citadel. She's gone crazy. She's absolutely crazy. Lost her whole staff, has said some outrageous things. All she wants to do is get on television, but she won big. So it plays well down there at least. And I want to point, we talk a lot about the Democrats' problems, which are real. The Republican problems may even be bigger. Look at the outcome in a special election in Ohio 6. That's a heavily Republican district, Mahoning Valley, Marietta down to Steubenville and Youngstown. Trump carried it by 29 points. The congressman who's retiring carried it by over 30. They won that special election by 9 points. Democrats turned out better, had more enthusiasm. I don't downplay the Democrats' problems, but boy, Republicans have problems too, James.
I'm so glad you brought that up because it's not in isolation. It's Alabama also. Mm-hmm. Similar thing. It was a state house seat, not a congressional seat. Mm-hmm. But everywhere that you see is there. There is in. I'm going to working on a proposal. The value of the court and court corruption is just unbelievable. And like I'm saying, we've said it before many times, we haven't lost a race since Dobbs. And please, we won that race in Ohio, and we won that race in Alabama. Yep. When you got a plus 28 district and you lose by 9, that's winning. That's winning big.
And don't forget New York 3.
Yeah, well, we were hoping we won by 1.5.
And won by 8.
Yes.
No.
In every instance, you see this. And you're right. They are kind of always dims and disarray, the Democratic problems. And Bobby Kennedy, who I actually don't think is a problem. Boy, do they have issues and big issues. And I think they need to continue to be exploited. I think the combination, I tell it in your message, and it's DC, Dobbs and corruption. Don't leave the corruption out. It's a big part of Supreme Court.
Right. I was going to say the Supreme Court is central to that.
Yeah. To your knowledge, I'll ask you a question. Is the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court justices, the only people in the government of the United States that operate without any code of ethics?
Well, James, they actually have a code of ethics. They just don't enforce it. And there's no way to enforce it. So it's a charade. It's a total charade.
They have one?
Yeah, they did adopt one, but they don't, as I said, there's no enforcement. So it doesn't matter. I mean, if you and I have a voluntary code of ethics and we decide we don't want to enforce it, we don't enforce it. We don't do it.
Okay. I'm working on a proposal that I modestly think, if implemented, might secure an election for Joe Biden. But I need to do a little bit more work on it.
Well, I'll tell you something. Coming from you, I can't wait. I mean that. That's
the power of this issue, of the Dobbs issue, and the power of the corruption issue is just breathtaking.
Yeah.
And the signature part of my platform is going to be a gift ban on gifts more than $50. Enforceable.
Would that affect Harlan Crow and all the people who've taken Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas on these trips?
You can spend 10 days on a yacht in Bali, or you were hitchhiking at Signature Aviation at Dulles Airport and found a seat on a G5 that just happened to be going to.
Well, there was an empty seat, James.
It was what?
There was an empty seat. I mean, suddenly they called Alito and said, "Sam, guess what? We got an empty seat."
God damn! It so happened that we have. And the guy says it with a straight face.
Yeah, yeah.
And I can't get enough of Martha Ann. Just please more Martha Ann, and don't do Martha Ann without a picture of Martha Ann. All right? She's just one of these people that the looks confirm who she is. So please, more Martha Ann.
More Martha Ann. Okay. James, let me close this segment with a personal one, which I didn't have a chance to tell you about before the show. When you get to be our age, you lose people. You lose people. One person we lost we didn't know was Jerry West. One of the greatest basketball players of all time and one of the greatest NBA executives of all time. And he really was something. The West Virginia kid who made so good. And I just found out before we went in the air that we lost one of our colleagues, Howard Feynman.
Oh God!
Who was a longtime veteran. Both Jerry West and Howard Feynman made a mark. But it's the price of getting old, James. Happens every week, unfortunately.
One of the things I'm glad is Mandy and Sydney and I took him to lunch. Must have been in the fall. That must have been like maybe 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And, he had been sick for a long time. He used to work in Kentucky. He loved to talk about Kentucky.
Oh, love Louisville. Louisville was his own,
Yeah. Howard was, some people thought he was like a typical, Northwest Washington creature. He was actually anything but.
Yeah.
And he was an influential journalist for a long time.
Newsweek, MSNBC, and elsewhere.
Amy and, his whole family. Condolences, but one of the things that I'm glad we were able to do is have a good 2-hour lunch with Howard.
Yeah. So, well, anyway, Jerry West and Howard Feynman, West, you made a mark.
Just NBA, in career, post-career, et cetera. I mean, I guess you could say Michael Jordan or LeBron were better basketball players, but not certainly by anything called a lot. I remember him and Elgin Baylor being just unbelievable. When Chick Hearn would do the simulcast, I was in the Marine Corps in the mid to late 60s, and Jerry West was just such a titanic figure in my life. I mean,
well, that great book, remember, that Dave Marinas wrote about the 60 Olympics, the USA's backcourt was Jerry West and Oscar Robertson? Wow.
It'd be hard to beat that combo.
Sure would be.
His career, his basketball career, approaches Michael Jordan. His post-basketball career, I don't know, approaches Pat Riley or something.
Red Auerbach. Right.
Yeah. Far back. Well, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, in anything that you do in terms of, overall NBA career, I can make an argument that he would be number one.
Yeah. Anyway, rest in peace, both.
Get the sleep you need with a delicious cup of beans. I tell you what it feels when you wake up the next morning. That's when you really feel it.
Yeah.
I like, this is the same thing I do all the time. When I woke up this morning, I looked and it was 7:20, and I went, "Oh, thank God!" All right, and again, we say on this show, good night's sleep determines more than anything else. Assume that you're in, pretty good health, is how you're going to feel the next day. And any tool that you have in your toolbox, this is actually pleasant.
Yeah.
And it actually, it's important to a good night's sleep. I can't recommend it enough.
And James, as you know, sleep is the foundation of not only your physical, but also your mental health. When you sleep well, you perform at your best, mentally and physically. Proper sleep also increases focus, boosts energy, and it also improves your mood. My wife can attest to that. Introducing Beam's Dream Powder, a science-backed, healthy hot cocoa for sleep. Dream has been a game changer for our sleep. Now, politics or covering politics can be stressful. And it was horrible watching the hours tick by, as you noted, until the alarm goes off at some hour. Now you can love knowing all it takes is one delicious cup of Beam before going to bed, and you'll be sleeping great, ready for that day ahead, and happy, as you just said, when the alarm goes off.
If I'm on YouTube for being rude to somebody, I'll tell you right now, it's tonight I got 3 hours sleep.
Yeah. Well, today our listeners get a special discount on Beam's Dream Powder. Their science-backed, healthy hot cocoa for sleep with no added sugar. Better sleep has never tasted better. There are tons of delicious flavors like chocolate peanut butter, oh yes, cinnamon, cocoa, and sea salt caramel. There are only 15 calories with 0 grams of sugar. You can't get enough of the chocolate peanut butter. I can't. It's always a treat. Now, wanting better sleep no longer keeps you up at night. Other sleep aids can cause next-day grogginess, but Dream contains an all-powerful, all-natural blend of reishi extract, magnesium, L-theanine, and melatonin and nano-CBD to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. Dream works fast, and the numbers don't lie. In a clinical study, 93% of participants reported Dream helped them get better sleep. 93%. Pretty good odd, James.
I'll take that. And I know anecdotal evidence is not what we go by, but anecdotal evidence from this court is pretty damn good.
I couldn't agree more. Beam Dream is easy to add to your nighttime routine. Just mix Dream into hot water or milk, froth, and enjoy before bed. You'll find why Forbes and the New York Times are all talking about Beam and why it's trusted by the world's top athletes and business professionals. If you want to try Beam's best-selling Dream Powder and get up to 40% off for a limited time, go to shopbeam.com/warroom and use the code WARROOM at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/warroom and use the code WARROOM for up to 40% off. You also can find the link in our show notes. Hey, James, we have interviewed dozens of authors, interesting books. I think the most compelling may be The Fall of Roe by Elizabeth Diaz and Lisa Lerer, who brilliantly and meticulously report how the Roe v. Wade abortion protections for almost half a century, most said it was settled law, were reversed, not just by the Supreme Court, but the predicate was a committed clever and sometimes duplicitous anti-abortion activists leading up to that court decision. With us today is one of my favorite journalists and also was one of my favorite students and the co-author of this fabulous book, Lisa Lerer. Lisa, first, thanks for joining us. And Roe was overturned by the court, but it was facilitated by that relentless grassroots campaign and strategizing that you guys just brilliantly depict. The likes of Marjorie, is it Dannenfelser? Yes. And Leonard Leo, who thought they were never able to change public opinion, but they outworked and they out-strategized the other side. How'd they do it?
Well, so one of the most interesting things we document is how this wasn't so much grassroots as elite in terms of like broad, widespread public support for these restrictions, right, as an elite, expansive network of activists and lawyers and some politicians who sort of pushed every way they could to make political progress and also, more importantly, make legal and strategic progress. And, part of what they did was work up this whole plan through the Federalist Society that dates back far beyond the time period we document in our book, which really is the final decade of what we call the Roe era, to get these conservative justices in place at the court and in lower courts. And then they had this very expansive legal campaign where they started passing laws that would undercut the standard for abortion, legalized abortion set in Roe in conservative state legislatures, understanding that one of those laws would eventually wind its way up the court system and have a shot of taking down this precedent of Roe. And if it wasn't that law, they'd have them all lined up, like, as one of our sources told us, like airplanes on the tarmac behind them, ready to go and just keep moving up the court system until eventually there'd be a case in a court that would be willing to do this thing that they had wanted to do for almost a half century, which was strike down Roe.
And perhaps even more than any of the Supreme Court justices, the most influential figure in this was Leonard Leo, who must be one of the 10 most powerful political people in America. Tell us about him.
Well, right now he controls a pot of money that I think is unparalleled in conservative politics right now. So he's very powerful in that way. But he's someone who really rose through the ranks of the Federalist Society, which is, of course, the association of conservative lawyers and law students and judges and politicians. And he helped build out this network that directly lead to lead to this, to Roe falling. And he's also, I think, part of what we show about him that really hasn't been shown in as much detail before. He's also a very devout conservative Catholic. And so ending Roe for him was, yes, a legal challenge and a legal mission, but it was also a spiritual mission, really tied to his faith, how he understands his faith and his family. And it went beyond just sort of this Federalist Society. There's plenty of people in the Federalist Society who, aren't as religiously observant, aren't as anti-abortion as he is. But it's sort of an intertwining both of his politics, of his judicial philosophy, and of how he interprets his Catholic faith.
Well, yeah, and it was a moral crusade for him and yes, for many of these people. And yet there were some things that were anything but a part of a moral crusade. Project Veritas was able to secretly tape Planned Parenthood, and then they distorted what they put out, and everyone latched onto it and changed perceptions of Planned Parenthood. Mitch McConnell really illicitly put together that Supreme Court. I mean, it wasn't illegal, but it was certainly illicit. And they falsely charged Democrats favored partial birth abortions. It was in anything justified the ends, despite the fact they said it was a moral crusade.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, Al, part of the reason Elizabeth and I wanted to write this book was not only because the Fall of Roe was such a historic and important moment in American political history. It was not only that it was this really unprecedented, but certainly extraordinary victory by the anti-abortion movement. But also we thought there was something you could see in tracking this story that would tell us something about our current politics. And I think it certainly tells us something about the Republican Party and about their willingness. They didn't do anything that was illegal here, but they certainly flouted political traditions and norms and broke things that many people believed were inviolable in our system, like the confirmation process and the traditions around that. And also, part of what you're pointing to with this Planned Parenthood stuff is, what happened was there was this rise of a more radical anti-abortion generation of activists, right? The sort of guys who came up and gals with the religious right, they believed in a more incremental approach. You chip away and you deluge the country with a million restrictions and laws. And then you had this younger generation who call themselves the post-Roe generation, who grew up really in the Roe era, and they were willing to take a far more aggressive approach, like, Project Veritas, which was involved with some of that secret taping of Planned Parenthood. And I think they sort of moved the window of what the movement would do in some ways, not discounting all the violence, of course, against the clinics in the 80s and 90s. And I think you've seen that in the Republican Party as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, there are no more pro-choice, pro-Planned Parenthood. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when George H.W. Bush was so pro-Planned Parenthood, as you all report, the Democrats called him rubbers.
Right.
But there are none of the. While this group, this coalition, was working so effectively, scheming, stitching together coalitions, lining up cases, as you say, like a runway at an airport, the progressives, with maybe a few exceptions like Cecile Richards, they were either A, overconfident that Roe never would be overturned, settle law, or B, so much into things like picketing Supreme Court justices or holding fancy galas or enforcing internal woke policy. Did they realize how badly they were beaten and out strategized and outworked here?
Well, I think they do now. Look, part of this is a question of strategy and being outworked and all of that. But I also think what abortion rights advocates were battling was this really pervasive sense of denial, right? That there was a sense that this was something that had been part of American life for 2 generations, that it was hard for voters to imagine that it could actually go, right? And so Democrats could get up there and say, protect abortion rights and Roe's on the line, all this stuff. And people said, sure. And some, Democrats would help them come out to vote. But generally, people didn't really believe that would be true, or they couldn't visualize that being true. And so as a result, it's hard to mobilize people around an issue that they don't think is all that much of an imminent threat. So I do think they were contending with that. However, they did, sort of perhaps drop the ball on some of what was going on in the states. And then you get to a point where Trump gets those 3 justices on, and it's not, that the airplanes are going down the runway, and it's really hard for them to really make much changes at all to stop this, right? So, yeah, it is a little bit of checkers versus chess for sure in terms of the expansiveness of the strategy. But I also think, we have to remember what the political dynamics were then, and they're so different than they are now.
James.
Oh, well, thank you. So, Lisa, when I read a book that actually confirms my professional cold career was based on something, and you verified it. And I saw it in Austin, and I'm just going to use a term: progressive advocacy groups. All right, they're useless. They used to come, and I would tell people, "Get these goddamn people away from me. I don't want to have anything to do with them. Go talk to them, humor them, and figure out what to do because they bring nothing."
Yeah.
And the key sentence in your book, I have it underlined 3 times. It is on
all right. Let me hear it.
376. The anti-abortion movement succeeded because most people did not believe it would.
Yeah.
Okay? I think that's the kicker sentence in the entire book. And they are obsessed with staying in Northwest Washington. They're obsessed with hanging out with people that are just like them. You can say what you want about Leonard Leo and Marge and these people. They went out in the country. They didn't think they were above going to a subcommittee meeting in the Missouri legislature.
Right.
Or anything like that. Or writing letters to the editor, or calling into local talk radio, or pressuring people in Congress. Is there any recognition in progressive advocacy that we need to rethink our role in what we do and how we become more effective?
It's so interesting because one of the things that really struck us with this book is this is a huge victory for the anti-abortion movement. This is a giant win for them. And, normally when someone has a giant win, we cover it that way. And in this, in some ways, it hasn't been covered in that same way. And so I think that has sort of staved off some of this reckoning. I also think, there were so many other issues going on, especially during the Trump years, that people just got, they were paying less attention to abortion than immigration or whatever craziness Trump was like saying that way, or whatever, foreign policy standard he was upending. There were so many things going on that it was hard to track something that people just didn't believe was actually on the line. So I do think there's a little bit of that, but you're right. What you're pointing to is then it is incumbent upon supporters of abortion rights to convince people that this is on the line. And as you're saying, to do the work, to go to those state legislative meetings, to be in those rooms. And I do think they sort of got a little disconnect. I mean, look, we all know, certainly here, that they lost a lot of those state houses. So they didn't have a lot to work with in a lot of those places during the Obama years. So that was a complication for sure. But you're right. There is an open question about whether they were doing the work in the states. And I don't know that reckoning has fully happened. I think there's a really new strategy now, right? As much as President Biden is out there promising everybody he can codify Roe, there's no magic wand to bring this back. And codifying Roe, as you guys know, is going to be really hard. You need 60 votes. You got to upend the filibuster. It's hard to see those things happening. So I do think that's forced the abortion rights movement to go back to the states and really work on these ballot initiatives, which is the kind of work you're describing in some form. You doubt it? What do you think? You're shaking your head a little bit.
Look, they got their ass beat. It's a sports contest. You had a better team. You had the best recruiting class in the country, all right? And you were Michigan, and Appalachian State beat your ass in the big house. What do? You rethink where you are. You don't, that America's so terrible and I can't believe that we lost. You had every advantage and they out-organized you. They beat you. Understand that. And of all of them, the one that I'm most fond of is Planned Parenthood because they actually do something. Yeah. Okay? That they're there. I mean, so we had Ryan Grimm, who is the better to the left-wing paper, and we had him on the show because he did an article about how paralyzed, and this was environmental groups, were by the whole identity. Let's just leave it at. Yeah. And I know that was a big problem in some of the choice advocacy groups, that they spent as much time trying to deal with pronouns and nameplates as they did with organizing. Do you think there is any recognition that maybe we need to move beyond this and worry about winning?
I think there is some recognition of that. I think you point out a structural thing that we probably should highlight for people, which is that, like, the biggest abortion rights organization, Planned Parenthood, they have to also provide healthcare services to people. So they have this dual mission of politics. They're both the biggest lobbying organization and the biggest provider of women's health. And sometimes those goals are at odds. Whereas the folks on the anti-abortion side, they're not providing, they have these anti-abortion pregnancy centers where they do some non-medical ultrasound and try to support women, give out diapers, things like that. But they're not providing anywhere near the same level of medical services as Planned Parenthood is. They are advocacy, legal, political organization. So that makes it hard. It is a little asymmetrical. Right. I also think what you're pointing out about identity politics is certainly something we saw go through those groups. And I have thought a lot about this. And I wonder, when that happened, it was 2020, 2021. And by that point, the legislation is already making its way to the court. And so I wonder if sometimes when you feel like there's very little you can do externally, there was a sense of like turning inward and let's fix our own organizations and so they could feel like they were making some kind of change. I do think there is a reckoning in the abortion rights movement that they have to take a different approach, that they have to return to the states. I've had conversations with people where I say, okay, so it took 50 years for the anti-abortion movement to take down Roe. Can you get it back? And how many years will that take? And people are telling me 20 years. They're talking in spans of decades. Nobody knows. This is all conjecture, but a longer term fight than just, the next election cycle.
So I'm a big fan of two people, and I think both of them at some level understood what was happening around them. One is Cecile Richards. Okay. I think Cecile was kind of aware of what it is. And the other one, I think, is Alyssa Hogue. Okay? I think Alyssa is a very savvy political person, but they spend so much time navigating the internal politics of this that they don't spend enough time out warning people and being there. And I big admire, particularly Cecile, but I know her better than Alyssa, but they are people in, I don't know, progressive Washington. They are women that understand the nature of the threat and understand the battle is not going to be won by protesting in front of Justice Kavanaugh's house, which is stupid. It's going to be won, hearts and minds, legislative subcommittees, et cetera, et cetera. And I just think your book is so valuable, and I hope a lot of people read it. And a lot of donors start demanding accountability. Look, they're well funded. Don't kid yourself. These people are not about to run out of money, and we need some accountability from the donors. And I think your book can go a long way toward that.
I do think there was this other observation we had in writing the book that was really interesting to me was I think, Cecile and Elise and the people you're talking about, they were focused on winning public opinion. Let's throw out the old safe, legal, and rare language that you guys, of course, know. Let's, destigmatize this procedure. Let's try to get it in the plot lines of movies and Grey's Anatomy. Let's try to win over the public. And then we can create change once we have public support. And like what the book really shows, and you think that's how it works, right? Like people want something, politicians listen, laws change. But in fact, this story is the reverse, where a majority of voters always supported some form of federal abortion rights in Roe for decades. But, conservatives were able to get the levers of power in the courts, in the White House, push things through. And now they have effectively changed the culture, while clearly, as like everything that's happened in our politics since Roe shows, without winning public opinion at all. And it's really the reverse kind of philosophy.
So before I turn it out, check my gut. My gut tells me that opinions on abortion were very consistent for a long period of time.
Yes.
That they didn't move one way. It was 57 to 38, okay, or whatever it was. And it just stayed there. And the other thing I do know about abortion is among females, there are really no class, racial, ethnic differences.
Yes, that's right.
Pretty consistent views. I do think that Dobbs jacked up the pro-choice numbers a little bit. I do
did.
Is that correct?
I mean, that's correct. I mean, the thing to know is the polling stinks. The polling is has been historically terrible on this issue. And you can kind of see it. Like one question people often ask is 15 weeks. This is a big thing that some Republicans want to do. What do you think about restrictions after 15 weeks? And when you ask people that, you'll have some portion of people, sometimes a majority, depending on the poll, that will say, yeah, there should be restrictions after 15 weeks. That's usually a point when you're seeing that first ultrasound of your baby or whatever. But then when you put up an ad, as Democrats have done, that shows someone who's post 15 weeks who has a horrible medical condition and will be really sick or lose their ability to have future kids, or, God forbid, is a teenager who's been sexually abused by their stepfather or something, those numbers change immediately. Right. So there's this disconnect between what the polling asks and how people actually feel about this. And I think part of what's happened since Roe fell is this massive education campaign where all of a sudden everyone's realizing what this actually, including the politicians, what this actually means in terms of weeks, in terms of different kinds of medical complications. Pregnancy can be a difficult and harrowing business. And I think that was sort of lost when this was all being asked in this sort of abstract political zone. And now that's changing. And you see these politicians having to talk about things like miscarriages or uteruses that I don't think I ever really heard politicians talk about before. That's now really part of our political conversation.
So back to you, Alan. I've got one more thing I want to talk about.
We're going to get back. There's so much great stuff to talk about in this book, Lisa. One of the huge controversies was when the Alito decision was leaked months before. And as you all right around that time, actually before the leak, the Wall Street Journal editorial page, which has a very close relationship with Justice Alito, criticized Chief Justice Roberts for trying to fashion a compromise over overturning Roe. I think there is no doubt that editorial, and I think the leak, were aimed at making sure Brett Kavanaugh and others didn't go wobbly on overturning Roe. And I think that there's a compelling reason to think that leak came from the Alito forces.
What's interesting about the leak is I actually think it was 3 leaks. We talk about it as the leak, meaning like that, the draft opinion. But you had that Wall Street Journal editorial that you point out that had this really inside the court kind of details about where people were, where the various justices were. And then you had similar information in the story that accompanied the document in Politico. So it was like, it really was a series of disclosures. And I think what it tells you, I think your gut on that is probably right. It was aimed at perhaps keeping the conservative side of things together. Of course, we don't know because we don't, know who the leaker was. I think these people have a way of coming out when they're ready. Certainly, a lot of people have done that investigative work, and no one's quite been able to get there yet. I suspect we will know at some point. But I do think it just showed the power of this issue. Like, one thing that's been really striking to me since the decision is all these investigations into the judge's ethics and this thing that's going on now with the flags and with the recording of Alito talking about, agreeing to godliness should be a principle of the court. I think part of what it did was there was the sense the Supreme Court was this world apart from politics, from Congress, from the White House, that they were this sort of temple of legal impartiality. And I think what this decision did and that leak did was bring them down in the muck with everybody else in a way. We see that in public opinion. People's views on the court had already been shifting. They shifted more. They began to see the justices as more political. Some of that came from those confirmation processes and how they were handled. But it also opened up this whole door to ethics inquiries and investigations. And now we know a whole lot more about where they're getting money from, who's paying for their vacations, all kinds of details that make the court look less like a temple of legal impartiality and more like a political body. And I suspect that's probably not great for democracy, but that's more.
We talked about the politics of it, Lisa. If Republicans should take control of the government, of Congress, they're not going to enact an abortion ban. We know that, but they can do lots of things, right? That would affect abortion access. What would be the 2 or 3 major threats that they would pose?
Well, so one thing I think everybody would want to keep their eyes on is the Comstock Act. And that's this law that's been on the books since the 1800s. You know it, yeah, where you can enforce. So they could effectively, through administrative action at DOJ, HHS, if they, depending how that's interpreted and how it's enforced, it could effectively create a national abortion ban without actually having to pass the legislation. You could criminalize abortion medication, which is how the majority of abortions happen now in America. You can criminalize like speculums that are used in the procedure, the mailing of those objects. And you could basically put in place a federal abortion ban without having to do it legislatively. How the politics play into this, though, is important because, we don't know. Trump's been very wiggly on this, and it's because he knows that the politics have changed. And so it's not clear what he would support or not support or allow or not allow. It's not knowable. We're operating in such a different political environment than in his first term.
Yeah. I'm going to turn it over to James, but I just want to make one point of this. I loved reading every page in this book. It was that good. But, sometimes when you read stuff, and I learn a great deal about this stuff, there's some things I knew and you got right. I have read so many stories that say in the late 70s, the Christian right turned Republican because of abortion. Wrong. They turned Republican because of tax exemption for segregated schools, starting with Bob Jones, and abortion was just a writer. And like everything else in this book, you got that, Lisa.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
James?
So you could say, well, James, you're soon to be 80, white Southern male. I guess you have a real mixed opinion or something on abortion. So I'll tell you the story. This not unique to me at all. My daughter in the summer of 2022 told me she was pregnant. Baby was due. Make a long story short, happy ending. Baby was born February 3rd. Do you know the first thing I did? I called, because I know her, the head of the largest hospital in Louisiana, Dr. Catherine O'Neill, and I said, I need a good healthcare lawyer. She gave me the name. She said, this is the best healthcare lawyer in the state. I called the lawyer and I said, look, I may need you. She said, this is my cell number, James. If you need me, let me know. Then I told a friend of mine who has a private plane, he said, this is my pilot's number. Don't even call me if you have to go to Virginia. Just get on the goddamn plane and go. Who in the world is told that their daughter's pregnant with the first grandchild whose first instinct is to call a lawyer and a guy with an airplane? No one could get anybody like that on the phone or knows a person. But think of a woman who got pregnant and is 32 years old with 2 kids and a guy that beat her up and works in a Walmart in Oban, Louisiana. She's screwed. I mean, literally, she's not within 700 miles of a place that she can get an abortion. And that's every day people are faced with that. Every day.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that was really important to us in this book, which I hope we accomplished, was to get, I think part of the power of this issue is how intimate it is and how everybody, even you, James, knows what the, even you,
when they get
knows like intimately what this is about. It's so personal, it's so intimate, and people understand it on this innate level. And as you guys know, the most powerful political issues are ones like that. And we really want to make sure we got that intimacy in the book. So we were able to capture these really just unbelievable scenes from across the country in June 2022, right before the decision was issued. And we were we really want to find the woman who was the last woman in the state to have an abortion. We found that in South Dakota. We were in a anti-abortion crisis pregnancy center, which are very hard to get in, on the day the decision came down. And we, of course, were at the clinic in Mississippi, which was the subject of the case. And we really wanted to tell those women's stories. And we saw a lot of what you're talking about. Like, these are people, people like your daughter, if she, God forbid, had some kind of health complication, she could get on that plane. But for these women, who are in these situations, it's very hard. How do you take off 2 days of work, drive to Virginia? You have to go sometimes twice, depending on the laws, and it's not always that, some of them, when we talked to, they told us it's not that they don't want a baby. It's that they can't afford a baby. They can't manage a baby. They're in a bad situation with their partner. They already have 2 kids and they really can't do a third right now because that'll throw them over, for various reasons. So there just is this disconnect between the lived realities of pregnancy and women's lives and the politics, or on the politics on that. And I do think that's changing a little bit because everyone finds themselves dealing with these realities in a different way.
So I love as a project to figure out the place you would be that you would have least access to abortion. Like maybe it's someplace in South Alabama. I don't know. Maybe it's in somewhere where you'd have to go to.
It might be in Louisiana, right?
It might be.
Maybe it's Florida now. I don't know.
I don't know, but it's just kind of a fun thing. If you're going around and a good statistician, it'd be kind of a fun question to say the worst place in the United States to be pregnant is boom. Before I'll let you go, I'll ask you one question, and I know you're going to have to answer. Why no index?
Why no index? Okay, this is I know. Everybody, all these politics people, all these Washington people, they want the index. They want to see where they're mentioned. Honestly, this answer is a little embarrassing because we couldn't stop reporting. Like a good, well-trained reporter by Mr. Al Hunt here. We just want to keep reporting and reporting and reporting. And so we hit up right against our deadline. And our publisher was like, ladies, this book is coming out this election season. In the summer, people want to read like nice beach reads. They don't want to read this. So it just has to be done by this date. And we're cutting your index because we don't have time for all that. So we're hopeful that we can
multiple editions in the future.
Yes.
It's an important book. Maybe you can add the index after.
Yeah, we did negotiate that. We said, okay, well, if it hits well enough, if we're fortunate enough to get another printing, let's try to get the index in. So hopefully we will.
Oh, you'll get another printing. I just want to take a moment of personal privilege. I first knew Lisa Lerer 23 years ago. When she was a special student in my first class at the University of Pennsylvania, and she has gone on to become a total rock star journalist at the time.
Thank you.
if you're going to read, I want to list all of our listeners out there. If you're going to get one book, and you ought to get more than one book, but if you care about politics, if you care about American public life, if you care about unfairness in America, you have to go today. Go to Amazon, go to Barnes and Noble, if that still exists, or wherever, and get The Fall of Roe. It is a really, really important book.
So thank you. So I concur 1,000%. This is a very important work, and it also just shows that what one side is, I hate to say this, if they got more heart than the other side, they can be Appalachian State and all of these progressive advocacy groups. They're all kind of nice people, but they need to rethink how they operate and rethink what their priorities are.
We wanted to run a campaign, buy this book for your dad for Father's Day. So I feel like you guys could be my spokesman for the Father's Day. The Father's Day campaign. It's not just for women. Buy it for your dad for Father's Day.
I agree. I'm gonna give it to my kid. There's no question. It's a wonderful book. The Fall of Roe.
Thank you so much.
Everybody, go out and get it today. Lisa Lerer, thank you so much.
Thanks so much. You bet.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
Right. Congratulations. Beat the heat with Miracle Sheets. It's critical, and we not even to the 15th of June yet. I cannot tell you how critical it's going to be on the 15th of August. And I can't tell you how hard it's going to be. And I can't tell you, the other thing that there's real danger in places like North Texas, Arizona, other places that you're going to be faced with real power issues with your air conditioning.
Yeah.
Get prepared. This is an important thing that you can have. And not only does it help you get a good night's sleep, it's going to save you on energy costs because you don't need to put that air conditioner on freezing cold like you normally do in the middle of the summer. So these sheets this is something I know something about. I've lived with it. They're going to pay for themselves in one summer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just reduced energy costs.
Because sleeping at the right temperature is a critical way to feel rested the next day. Now, if you wake up too hot or too cold, we highly recommend you check out Miracle Made's bed sheets. Miracle Made sheets are inspired by NASA and use silver-infused temperature-regulating fabrics, so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long, no matter what the weather is like outside. Plus, the silver lining prevents 99.7% of bacteria growth, which means Miracle Sheets require 3 times less laundry because they stay clean and fresh 3 times longer. Your bed will feel freshly made every night. So stop sleeping on bacteria that can clog your pores and cause breakouts and acne. Sleep clean with Miracle instead. Trust us, with no more odors, no more gross odors, life is a whole lot better for your household. The NASA-inspired, temperature-regulating, silver-infused fabrics truly give you maximum comfort in any weather. And they make pillowcases and comforters too. So join us in getting better sleep every night. Not only are Miracle Sheets luxuriously comfortable, they don't have the high price tag of other luxury brands. Miracle Sheets feel nicer than bed sheets used by some 5-star hotels. So it's a vacation every time you get into bed. Now, I usually picture myself in, I don't know, maybe the Bahamas, James? But anyway, it's your call. So go to trymiracle.com/warroom to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo code WARROOM at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product that it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you're not 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/warroom and use the code WARROOM to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/warroom to treat yourself. And remember, Father's Day is coming up fast. So thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode. And you also can find the link in our show notes. And now for the outrage of the week. I've never met David French, a columnist for the Dispatch and the New York Times. He's a conservative libertarian with whom I probably disagree 75% of the time. But from afar, I am a huge fan. He is an honest, principled conservative, too rare these days. He's a lifelong evangelical Christian. This week he wrote how he was canceled by his own church, the Presbyterian Church in America, a very small conservative denomination, which has been his family's church for 15 years. He was scheduled to speak to a gathering of Christians on how to be supportive of your church in a polarized politics. After protests, the forum was canceled because of French's participation. What were his offenses? One, he and his wife adopted a little girl from Ethiopia. Some church members said, why couldn't you adopt someone from a place like Norway? Others were actually slavery apologists. Racism remains a driving force in elements of right-wing Christianity. But his greatest offense was opposing Donald Trump. David French's adversaries here worship the morally bankrupt felon. Critics like Barry Weiss make a good living highlighting and attacking left-wing wokeism. That's very real. But cancel culture and despicable bigotry is a far greater problem on the right, especially with white Christian nationalists.
Well, I read the same piece that you did, all right? And I'll address two things you brought up. The whole anti-wokeness, Barry Weiss interviewed me, was very nice. I include my dear friend Bill Maher in this. Basically, we've won. All right, just let it go. They know they're not going to say, gee, we made a terrible mistake, but they know they made a terrible mistake. And we just don't need to keep spiking the ball. That's my view. There's some remnants of it, and you got to do a little cleanup operation. But most everyone knows this was just a giant error. And everybody is kind of deleveraging and backing off. Just let them back off. But there's just like the whole woke industrial complex. Well, I was proud to be part of the anti-woke industrial complex, but this war has been won. No one is coming back with it. They're not winning, never have won Democratic primaries. They were massively disliked. They were massively unpopular. Now, the only thing I would say about David French, and I read it, and it was nice, and it was moving and sincere. You mean you didn't know? Okay, that the lifelong principled Republicans, okay, you didn't know? You didn't see Reagan open his campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi? Really? And I understand, but how could you be so dense to be shocked at this? This has always been a part of the modern Republican coalition. Now, I'm glad that people like this or have seen the light, but man, you had to be wearing sunglasses for a long time to be surprised by this shit.
Okay.
All right, so this is my outrage. Be very careful here. This is my idea, and it is a good idea, and it will help. Is the White House should announce that Vice President Harris is giving a major policy address in Phoenix, Arizona. And don't say anything else. And have everybody think that, tell Fox, be sure to get Fox, get Newsmax, get everybody there for the Harris thing. And everybody's going to think it's going to be an apology for immigration or something like that, or she's going to address a big abortion initiative, because that's what they put out to do it. Instead, she will talk about the staggering reduction in crime in the United States since Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been in charge. The latest, this is from NBC News, latest FBI statistics point to historic drop in crime in the first quarter of this year. All right, we're talking after years where the murder rate fell, one of the highest rates ever. Property crime rate dropped precipitously. All right? And sit there and congratulate law enforcement. You're a former attorney general. You're a former prosecutor. Quit being so goddamn predictable. All right? Surprise me. And the guy that knows the most about this, quoted extensively in the NBC article, in every article that's written, is a friend of mine from New Orleans, a guy named Jeff Asher, who is considered to be the foremost, at least the most quoted crime statistician in the United States today, by far, not close. And if you listen, they're still talking about crime in the streets and crime. This is like the 90s. Get out front of this. Surprise people. And then what's Fox going to do? They're going to have everybody there waiting for a major Kamala Harris thing, and she's going to talk about abortion. She's going to try to defend the disastrous Biden border policies. She's in Arizona, ground central for all this shit, and do something different. And it will work. And flood the press, flood, Fox will be willing to put people out for the next 5 days all over TV talking about the historic, precipitous drop in the crime rate in the United States. It will work, I promise you. But you got to surprise people and just do this event. Now I've gone from the most skeptical Biden supporter in the country to the most enthusiastic. But God damn it, get out there and surprise me.
And that follow-up, have a bunch of cops, because there are cops who appreciate that and talk about it. Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot.
All up. Call the bookers. Get them out there. Yeah. Tell columnists, offer to be on conservative outlets, say we're ready. We've set Fox 5 names to talk about this, and none of them has responded. They don't want to cover this story. All right? Understand, when you do something, it's got to be a sustained, planned attack. And it's got to be over a period of days. You got to look at it like you get ready for a battle. Well, you got to have supply lines. You got to have ammunition. All right, you got to get the terrains covered. You got to do all of the sort of complicated, mundane things that go into a successful military operation. It is like that with a political operation. You have to start from the position of unpredictability and surprise. Once you've achieved that, then you press. And this will surprise. Don't say anything. Just say she's given a speech in Phoenix, and let everybody presuppose what the top is going to be. And the only thing now, she doesn't talk about the border anymore. She talks about abortion, which is a good issue for us. But everybody knows that. Surprise me, please.
Okay. You heard it, White House. Follow through.
Number 1 champion right here, Mr. J. Carville.
All right, here we go. Now the listener questions. James, let's pick up on something that we were talking about earlier with Pete in Raleigh, North Carolina. We love these listener questions. I love Raleigh, too.
Raleigh's a booming freaking place. I just picked up a nonstop.
It's really taken off. With so much writing on this election, Pete asked, why does Biden care about pleasing the far left? They're not going to vote for Trump. Why doesn't he gravitate more to the center and woke issues and tell the extreme wing of the party to be patient and wait for an election where democracy isn't at stake?
Well, I agree with the whole premise. These people are a disaster on every level. Of course, they're the reason that we had this idiotic immigration policy for the first part of the Biden administration. I do think that they have paid too much attention to them, but like everybody else, they've come to realize that. And proud to say that I was one of the first anti-identity politics people ever. remain very proud of it because I just think humanity always trumps identity. But sometimes when you win, you just got to take the victory, all right?
Yep.
And the White House, I think, has now got a more mature attitude about these people. Humor them, let them come to meetings, and pay no fucking attention at all to them. And as it's been pointed out to me before, one of the chief backers of this, Pramila Jayapal, her sister ran in the Democratic Party and got the crap beat out of her.
Yep.
Even people would say, James, God, you say some really controversial things. And my answer is, there was nothing controversial about it. Everybody hated this. Now, it wasn't just white males. It was black people and Latin people and females, and no one wanted to live under this tyranny. And that's what they were trying to install in the United States, is tyranny, and people rejected it. And we have won this fight. It's over. We won, you lost, get over it.
Declare victory.
Declare victory and accept it. And
Right.
You don't have to remind them. They're not going to say anything. They're completely been put in their place. They've been humbled. And just be humane to them. Provide them with food and water and shelter, and be nice to them.
James, Kevin in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. You and I went to a wonderful wedding of Luke Russert's and Nantucket last weekend. Boy, it was fabulous. Luke, you were terrific, and your wife was probably even better. But I have a certain fondness for Cape Cod. But in any event, Kevin asked, isn't family planning rights a much better rhetorical frame than birth control? This is on the abortion. Yes, I agree it is. And I think you ought to talk about, pro-choice. You don't have to use the word abortion. It's understood. It really is. It's implicit, and it is a winning issue everywhere. So you ought to talk about it more, Kevin. You're right. Family planning is right. Women's rights are right. It's if the Democrats do better than some people thought they were going to do this year, certainly a major element will be abortion or family planning rights.
I'll point out to my friend in Cape Cod that there's, I think, 8 LSU players that are playing in the Cape Cod League this summer. I just saw an article.
That's not what I instantly thought about Cape Cod, but I will now.
It just so happened I saw the article on the NOLA site, and just Cape Cod is a great place. I disagree with you. I think you should always use the term that most people use. And they're not family planning pills, they're birth control pills. And I understand where, and I understand it to some extent that... you
can use both, James.
Huh?
You can use both.
I know, yeah, but you got to use... You just use the word that's most common to people. I understand what he's saying. It's not a big deal. It's not a hill that I'm going to die on. But I think we should open a whole birth control that's next. They already told you that Dobbs was not enough. These people are insatiable, and they desire to control the lives of women. And they use Dobbs to talk about the next thing that's coming is birth control. Please pay attention to it.
The pill.
But I understand the question. I understand the reason behind it. I just think birth control is a better term than family planning.
Joe in Dobbs Ferry, New York says Project 2025 is the blueprint for a potential second Trump administration. They have plans to enforce the Comstock Act, an old law still in the books that could lead to a national ban of abortion. We do all kinds of other things. Shouldn't Democrats start aggressively talking about this more?
Goddamn, these fucking letter writers are born in the same room as I was. I was going to, I want to give you one name, and this name is going to reverberate, and you're going to hear this name a lot as we get closer to the Republican convention. Russell Voigt, Voight. I promised the Politicon that I would do a video on this, but I've thought about it, and I want to let it stew for another 2 weeks. The whole Milwaukee thing is going to be a giant clusterfuck. All right, I promise you. And Russell Voigt, we're going to be doing videos. We're going to do a whole educational program on the Republican Platform Writing Committee. But I want to let this thing get a little riper. I want to do a little bit more research. But right here, you heard it first, and you're going to hear it often. It's going to be a relevant name in American politics in the next couple of months. Russell Voigt, Voight.
And you can go to James's Substack to see more of what he's going to do on this over the next 5 months.
We'll be talking about it on every. It'll be every outlet that we got. That we're going to be talking about Mr. Voigt and his cohorts.
John in Sonoma, California, God, what a great place, said Biden's ego won't let him do what we all think he needs to do, a full LBJ, to say, I will not accept the nomination, throw it open. John, you're dreaming. First of all, Lyndon Baines Johnson did that in March of 1968 while a war was raging. I wish very much that Joe Biden had not run. I think it was a terrible mistake, both for him personally and politically, but he didn't agree. And he's running, and in June or July of 2024, he's not going to do an LBJ.
Well, I wish in one hand and shit in the other, see which one fills up the fastest. Sergeant Kelko, my drill instructor. All right. I agree, and I wish. But there's no... The days of wishing are over. The days of reality are here. I hope President Biden does well if this debate on the 27th goes off, which I'm still skeptical of. But
yeah,
but
we got another question from Raleigh. This is a Raleigh day, Laura, and she's picking up on Joe's question but turning it around. Where is the Democrats' Project 2025? We surely must have think tanks working for us in our vision for the future. It's demoralizing, she says, to hear about decades-long plans orchestrated by Republicans and nothing from our side.
So I'm going to tease a forward-looking plan that people will appreciate, that is simple, understandable, and addresses a need, is a gift ban on members of the Supreme Court. I'm flushing this out. I'm going to do a special edition on, probably do this one on Substack. But this idea, people know about Dobbs. It's been the best political issue I've seen in my lifetime. They know about the corruption. What they don't know is the only employees of the federal government that are not subjected to a gift ban are members of the Supreme Court. And we're going to tell them. But not only we have to tell them, President Biden has to tell them and has to say, if you don't do this, and we have a Democratic Congress, we're going to cut off funding to the Supreme Court. Now, I can see the chorus of people saying, you're going to precipitate a constitutional crisis. I got news for you, dude. We're in the middle of a fucking constitutional crisis. We have corrupt people who perjured themselves, who are taking gift after gift in right now. There is a constitutional crisis in the United States. We need to act like it, and we need to exploit it. Okay. And the idea that we just got to accept the fact that Clarence Thomas takes these trips and Alito shows up at the airport and upside down flags, and the Neil Gorsuch house is as bad as any of them. Is as bad as any of them. The sale of his house, not to mention John Roberts' wife and the staggering conflicts there. But we have to run. Everybody knows about Dobbs. Everybody hates it. Everybody knows that they want to control every woman's body in the United States. What people don't realize is there's something that can be done about this massive corruption that exists within the Supreme Court.
Okay, we're going to wait for that Substack rollout because I think you got more than one or two or seven or eight, James. Lisa in Henrico, Virginia, says, when will the Biden campaign start sending a stream of surrogates to Fox News to make their case to the right? Jasmine Crockett would be a great candidate. You know, you're onto something, Lisa. Pete Buttigieg has done it, and he does it well. I don't think you want to get Adam Schiff on there, but I think there are people. I think Congresswoman Crockett might be one. You know what you're going to get. Don't get rattled by him. Don't get mad. Just go and make your case, and maybe you just affect a few people.
They're not going to take them. I mean, they might take Pete every now and then. They don't do that anymore. They really don't do that.
If you ask and you pressure them, they'll do it. They have to. Not selectively.
I used to have I had a contract at Fox. I was on there for 2014. I'm just saying, I happen to watch. The one they got is, and my hat's off, we were on there. What's her name? Jessica Tarloff, the one on the 5?
Yeah.
She's pretty good.
Yeah. She's
pretty damn good.
So I think Juan Williams is still there, isn't he?
I think Jessica is maybe it's because she's on that show that's so idiotic. The other thing is, you know, we talked about this, the whole, the Hunter Biden thing, you got to watch them yesterday. They were just caught with their pants down. And of course, the Fox audience is so racist and so stupid that what they telling them in 1 hour that Biden is a blathering idiot that can't utter a sentence, that's confused old man and he doesn't know where he is, but who is rigging the entire Department of Justice and federal court system to cover up his crimes by having his son convicted of a crime. That's how fucking crazy they are. That's how, and they're not, I don't think they want anybody on the air telling them how crazy they are.
I think it's worth making the effort to do it selectively and then criticizing them for not taking it, if that's the case. So I think that was the point that she was making.
To be on Fox, and we will grant it one.
All right, our final question is from Gordon in Norwood, Michigan, who says, are we faced with a Republican that's marching all of its troops to deny any result they dislike in November, and are we adequately preparing for this contingency?
The answer is yes, and I hope so.
No, I think the answer is yes. And last time, you know, after Democrats had been ill-prepared going back to 2000, they were prepared. And our friends Seth Waxman and the late Walter Dellinger and Don Varelli, the three former solicitors general, the three amigos, won 60 cases. And I hear they are ready. The two of them are ready to go again.
Good. I think we do. I do think we're ready legally. But, you know, you got to be ready because they can do everything. They're going to do it at the state legislatures. They're going to do it here. They're going to do it there. You know, probably
there are nightmare scenarios. Hypothetically, Biden carries North Carolina by 19,000 votes, and the right-wing North Carolina legislature decides they're not going to recognize the Biden electors, and they want to send another to Washington. So what happens?
This is another real one. For Biden to get to 270, he needs to carry the states that Democrats traditionally carry.
The blue wave, right.
The blue wave plus Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. But I got news for you. That gets you to 269.
One what?
That gets you, so there are two. There's, I think Nebraska 2 that's allocated by congressional district, and there's Maine 2 that's allocated by congressional district. So let's say this is very possible. Biden carries Nebraska 2, and Trump carries Maine 2. And now we're 269, 269.
No, if that happens, we'd be 270.
269, 268.
Right.
The Nebraska legislature says we're going to not pay attention to this. We're going to instruct all, like 48 out of 50 states, whoever carried the state is going to get all the states' electoral votes. The Maine legislature is Democratic. And they will say, if you do this, then we're going to we'll see you and we'll raise you one.
We're going to do the same. They've said that. Absolutely.
Right. And this is not some far-fetched thing of a couple guys and, you know, having too many drinks and eating dinner and coming up with crazy scenarios to think about. In North Carolina, there's something else because there's some possibility we do. But this, they will use it to say, we're just going to do like 48 other states. Yeah. But Maine has cards too. They can play checkmate. Yeah. And like I said, this is not a far-fetched scenario at all.
Nope, it's not. Okay, I want you to please keep those questions in. If we didn't get to your question this week, we'll get to it next week. You make us think, you make us better. So thank you. Keep them coming. Hey, thanks for listening to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. Don't forget to send your questions for us by email to politicswarroom@gmail.com or tweet them for next week's show @Politicon. Now, following this episode, we'd appreciate it if you'd check out the links to our sponsors, Beam and Miracle Made, in our episode show notes. We thank you for supporting them because when you do, you help make this podcast happen. Now, to keep up with us, subscribe to Politics War Room on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. You can also find other shows you might enjoy on the Politicon YouTube channel or when you search Politicon on your favorite podcast sites. Now remember, please rate the show with a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with another show as we continue our War Room planning.